Why am I getting out of buy-to-let property? Great to see you. This is Charles Kelly Money Tips. Listen up, because I'm going to tell you why I'm quitting buy-to-let property after being an advocate of buy-to-let for years as an investment. But things have changed and I've had enough. I'm getting out. Let me explain why. First of all, I want to give you a brief history of the buy-to-let market, the modern day buy-to-let market as we know it. Yes, people have been letting properties for hundreds and thousands of years, but the modern version of buy-to-let with a buy-to-let mortgage and a short hold AST tenancy agreement is relatively new. It started, I think it was around about the late 90s when an organisation called ALA, the Association of Residential Letting Agencies, got together with the lenders and they set up a scheme for the buy-to-let market. And before that, most lenders would lend on residential properties. They might do a second mortgage on a holiday home if you had enough income to support both, but it was mostly residential mortgages. And there were commercial bank mortgages, but I remember at that time the commercial bank mortgages were like 15% interest, and they would only maybe lend 2/3, and they do it over 15 years, so it wasn't very attractive. So yeah, there were companies in the buy-to-let market, and older landlords who'd bought properties very cheaply were in that market and had been for years. But it was killed in the I think late 50s, early 60s when a landlord named Rackman came to prominence, and he was talked about in Parliament. This was like a slum landlord who had lots of properties in Notting Hill Gate, which were let to people, mainly to the black community, and they were not kept in very good conditions. They were like big mansion properties, but they were all in rooms. There was no HMO laws, there was no rules. You could have a cooker in the room, a gas cooker in the room, and a gas stove on the landing, and all sorts of things. But in fact, he was one of the few landlords that allowed people from the black community to rent properties. A lot of landlords would say no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. Sorry to say that, but that was the way it was. And my parents suffered racism in London in the 50s themselves. Anyway, this guy was the evil landlord. So the government brought in these strict new rules on tenancies, and then you couldn't get rid of a tenancy, so you got this thing called sitting tenants who sat on a property. You couldn't put the rent up, so you'd have tenants like 30 years later, they're 90 years old, and they're paying £1 a week rent on a property in Notting Hill Gate, and the landlord literally has to buy them out. They have to pay a lot of money to get them out, and there were properties sold cheaply because there was a sitting tenant in there. So yeah, and you could buy this property, either negotiate them to go out, or you just wait until they die. So this is what happened for years, from the 60s up to the 90s. The market was killed. And I remember trying to rent a property in the late 70s, and it was very difficult. Landlords didn't really, there wasn't enough landlords around, and you think it's tough now. I mean, there was this office in Oxford Street, and you'd go in there, it was crowded with people. It was a small little office, and it was crowded with people all desperate to get a room or a flat or anything from this agency. And if you kept going back every day and kept ringing them every day, all right, then we'll give you something, just get out of my sight. That's the way it was. And they would, it would really be difficult to get a place. You'd have to ring up every day and then go there in the afternoon. And I worked nearby there, so I was able to pop in and out until I got on their nerves enough, and they gave me this room. And it was a terrible place. This guy had a room in the back of his house and had to share the kitchen and bathroom, and their kitchen wasn't very nice, and they were rude to us, and that's what. So we didn't stay there long, but it was hard. And I got another place where the landlord didn't give me a short hold tenancy agreement. He gave me what's called a license, which gave him much more rights and less rights for me. So when there was a dispute, he said, "No, you're not on a tenancy. You're not on a lease. You're on a license." So he was a clever landlord, had a lot of properties around Clapham. So there was a different kind of market, and it was the professional landlords mostly, not ordinary people buying a buy-to-let property. And then things changed, and it kind of took off. And I remember I was in the mortgage business at that time. I was a financial advisor, and we were doing lots of buy-to-let mortgages with Mortgage Express and loads of different lenders and different. I can't remember all the names now, but there was national home loans, and there were new schemes coming out all the time for buy-to-let mortgage, and it really did take off. And that meant there were a lot more rental properties around. And in those days, you could buy the properties at relatively good prices. You could rent them out, and that would cover your mortgage. Now, your mortgage in those days were 10 or 12% interest, but the rent would cover it. And you think, well, the prices are going up so much, I'm not worried about income as long as the mortgage is covered. So that worked well. Then rates came down and it became more profitable. But you've got to remember that there was a shortage of properties because the government, successive governments, have not built any major building program, particularly for the council and social houses, since the late 1970s. I remember at that time there were council houses being built everywhere, and they would go to families. So if you're a single person, it was still difficult, but not as difficult as it was now. And people could choose a council. No, I don't like this area. No, I don't want to be in Kilburn. No, I want to be in Kentish Town. Oh no, I can't live there. No, I'm not going to. No, and they would sort of try and accommodate them. It was literally like that, and. Then the right to buy came in under Margaret Thatcher, where she allowed people to buy their council homes, which I think was a good scheme. It got people up the social ladder. The problem is the councils then stopped building new homes. They said, well, if they're going to be able to buy them on a right to buy, we're not building any because they might buy them off us, and that's not fair. It was stupid policy, because why not build more and you've got people in a house? The fact is they're not building because they might use them and buy them later on. Anyway, that's another rant I won't go into. So no council house. That's why there was a shortage of properties, and this model worked well, and returns were quite good, and even with higher interest rates you could get good capital growth, and it's worked well since the 90s. So 90s, 30 odd years, it's worked pretty well, and I've seen people build quite sizable portfolios. I've seen ordinary people think, well, this is better than putting my money into pension schemes with low returns and high charges. And of course, Gordon Brown ruined the pension market with his extra taxes on pensions. So a lot of people lost trust in it, and they said, well, I'll buy a property. I'll buy 2 or 3 properties, put all my money into that, all my efforts into that. It's not easy, and that will be my pension. And then the government thought, well, this is getting too popular, and too many of these oiks are making money out of this. And no, it's not right. You can't let every rabble make money out of this. Only us can make money. Only the people at the top can make money. So now they started to change it. And the last government brought in Section 24, added taxation to the landlords. They also brought in changes to the way you could get wear and tear allowance. They brought in other changes, electric certificates, and then the EPCs and all sorts of things. They brought in all sorts of stuff to make life more difficult for landlords. And now this government are coming in and rationing it up even further, because now we're in a socialist era, and socialists don't like landlords. They traditionally don't like private businesses, although they wouldn't admit that. So they're bringing in anti-landlord legislation called the Renters' Rights Bill. This replaces what was going to be the Renters' Reform Bill under the Conservatives. Now they're bringing in renters' rights. So what does that tell you? Renters' rights. They're bringing in employment rights to give more rights to employees, and all sorts of things. So they are generally especially anti-business and anti-landlord. They don't like landlord. Not everyone in the party is like that in the Labour Party, but there are a lot of it. Angela Rayner, you're a landlord. These sort of people, they don't live in the real world. They live in quite a nice little environment themselves. They're like most politicians. They're sitting there like pigs with their noses in the trough, and they end up ruining the country. And then another government comes in and makes a few other changes. There's no long-term thinking. There's no long-term planning. And going back to when they built these council houses in the 50s, 60s and 70s, the governments had more long-term vision then. They were building new towns, the Milton Keynes of this world, Basildon, Crawley around Gatwick Airport, Stevenage. And this meant that people who were crowded in London could move out into nicer environments, and they've worked very, very well. Why did it stop? No long-term vision. Short-term vision, let's get to the next election, let's win the next election, let's put taxes down so people will vote for us, and then we'll try and get through the next election. The next election comes and they win it, and then they relax a bit and become complacent like the last government did, and nothing really happens. They just chop and change. Taxes are pretty much the same. You get a bit of extra tax here and a bit of extra tax there. But the country has generally been in a bit of decline for the last 30 or 40 years. So where are we now then? Massive wealth has been transferred into property, and the government now wants to get their hands on some of this money, so that they're going after landlords. Inheritance tax changes as well. Inheritance tax changes to farm landowners as well. So we're now living in this socialist regime, right? Some of the stuff they're coming out with is near communism, and after 30 years, I think we've had a good period of relatively business-friendly governments. Now it's changing, and I think for the next 5, maybe 10 years, if they get in again, God forbid, we're going to have problems in business. And that's why a lot of millionaires are leaving, not just because of the higher taxes, because they're already pretty high anyway, but they're leaving because they can see the writing on the wall, a socialist era coming in. Let's get out for a few years, maybe go back if we get a business-friendly government back in again, or a government's not going to tax us up to the hilt. So what about me then? My personal experience, and incidentally, the last Blair government, the Labour government, was not anti-business, by the way. They tried to hold that middle ground. That's why they were so successful, because they didn't go left-leaning, too socialist. They didn't go too right-wing. They held the middle ground. They're very popular. He's a clever guy, and he allowed the buy-to-let things to go through. He was business-friendly. The country boomed for a while, but then the Labour thinking comes in again. They spend too much money. They ended up wrecking the economy, but he was a business-friendly Prime Minister. So my personal experience, I've had 30 odd years of buy-to-lets, dealing with tenants. Nothing wrong with tenants. I love tenants, but I just haven't got the patience for it. I've run out of patience. I've run out of energy for it. So I'm just sort of getting out of it, And of course, we've got the new threats from these BPUs. They're a special department in governments and local authorities and compliance departments. I call them BPUs, or business prevention units, right? And they think, oh, business is going too well, let's do something to prevent it. Or people are making too much money, that's not good. Let's prevent it. Let's rein it in and try and change it. Let's tweak it. And they basically fuck it up. Fuck it up. I won't even say that word. They always do it. And every government starts tweaking and fiddling with business, they fuck it up. Okay, I think you know what I'm trying to say. So we've got lack of social housing, and yet landlords are blamed for this. For evicting tenants, or for causing homelessness. We've got mass immigration from both governments, from the last government who failed to control immigration. That's why they were kicked out. And now this government, it's just going to go through the roof. They're even talking about EU Youth Mobility Scheme now, which will bring in thousands of unemployed Europeans into the country to find work here, when we've got millions of unemployed people sitting on their arses doing nothing, living on benefits. I'm a Generation X. I don't want to work. I'm quite happy to sit on benefits and live at home in my bedroom. And no, I don't want to work. No, I'm too stressed. It's not fun working. And then we've got layabouts there, playing sick all the time. Millions of people costing the country billions, and now they want to bring in more people into the country. So then they can say, well, there's no jobs around. Okay, so we got that from both governments. Population increase, of course, people are living longer. There's more divorces, so people want more smaller units now. Planning hold-ups, yes. Now this is a big one. Even though the government said they're going to build 1.5 million homes over 5 years, the last government said the same thing. It doesn't happen, does it? Why? Because the planning. It takes, if you bought a bit of land and you had planning permission, say without planning permission rather, it could be 2 years before you get shovels in the ground. And if you buy land without planning permission, you've got to fight tooth and nail to get it through. There's a lot of what we call NIMBYism, not in my backyard. Now, fair enough, people don't want thousands of houses in their backyard. But if the government did what they said they were going to do in the last, the Cameron government, building 7 new towns, it wouldn't have meant that you're tacking on more and more houses into existing conurbations. You would have built proper new towns with roads and rail links as well. So we've got this population increase. Then we had planning hold-ups, then restrictive lending. The government, the last government, told lenders to rein it in. No, things are going too well, let's rein it in. Make life more difficult to get mortgages. And I saw this myself. And of course, lenders have to comply. So there were very few 100% mortgages around for first-time buyers. They're starting to creep back in again, but the lenders want a guarantee. There used to be a mortgage guarantee policy that people took out so they could borrow 100%, and they had a mortgage guarantee policy added to the cost was added to their mortgage, and that meant an insurance company paid out if they defaulted and the lender didn't get their money back, and that worked quite. I don't know why it stopped. As I said, we've had these problems, planning hold-ups. Now we've got anti-landlord policies coming through. As I said, Section 24 of the last Conservative governments, Renters' Rights Bill, which is a combination of both idiot governments, Conservative and Labour, and the end of Section 21, no-fault evictions. In fact, it was it was mentioned in Parliament today on Prime Minister's questions. Some Labour MPs said, in my constituency, the landlords are doing this to my tenants in my constituency. And then Keir Starmer says, yes, we're going to do something. Our renters' rights bill will benefit 11 million tenants. I don't know how it's going to benefit them. And we've got to end this terrible practice of no-fault evictions, he said. This is what Starmer's saying in Parliament. Now, it won't benefit tenants. Tenants will end up paying more. There'll be less properties around. They'll pay more rent because if a landlord sells up, who's going to buy these things? The corporates that come in, the Lloyds banks, the Goldman Sachs, the BlackRocks, they're over here and they'll be buying tens of thousands of properties. And do you think they're going to rent them out cheap? No, they're going to have like a tenancy agreement as long as your arm, and they're going to go for the upmarket tenants. They're going to go for the professionals who probably don't cause as much trouble, and they're going to build lots of build to rent properties at very expensive rates, co-living, all this stuff, and fancy studios in Wembley and places like that, at $1,200 a month for a room or $1,500 a month for a room, and I can sit down with my laptop in the co-living area. Yeah, all very nice if you can afford it, but they're going to cherry pick the best tenants and leave the rest to the rest of the landlords who are struggling away. So that's probably what's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be of much benefit to 11 million tenants. That's just a load of nonsense. But the end of Section 21 no-fault eviction means that instead of a landlord being able to say, well, look, you come to the end of your tenancy, I'm serving at Section 21, and go, no, now they'll be able to fight it. And why a landlord has to serve a Section 21 at the end of a tenancy, I don't know. When you stay in a hotel for a week, you leave. At the end of your booking, you go. You don't need to get a server notice. Oh, no, you haven't served me notice. I'm not going. I want to go to court. No, it's nonsense. It's a load of crap. So that's going to go. That's what scared landlords mostly. And I think that's why a lot of them have got out. Thousands of landlords have got out. I've been talking about this for a long time. Then you've got other things coming in this renters' rights bill. Apart from Section 21, is the end of what they call backdoor evictions. They'll have to explain that in when they bring out the proper guidance. They're going to bring in open-ended tenancy. So instead of a 6-month or a 12-month, it's going to be open-ended. The tenant can kiss goodbye anytime they like. No, the landlord probably has to wait a year going to court before they can get them out. And of course, you've got the court system completely clogged up. So even if you've got a good case, it could take 6 months before you can get to court. And then if you're missing one bit of paper, the judge says, I'm throwing it out, go back to square one. Believe me, it happens. And they're bringing in new minimum housing standards, and if you don't meet them, you're going to be in trouble. Many councils and housing associations, believe it or not, when I was a councillor, would fail these standards miserably. I've been into big housing associations that run all the housing in the whole borough, and you walk into one of their properties that I had a complaint about from a tenant, and you see there's no smoke alarms. I said, there's no smoke alarms here. And the people from the Housing Association, Affinity Sutton in those days, said, no, we don't have to provide smoke alarms. We don't provide them. The tenant had one 6 years ago put in by the fire brigade, and the batteries run out. Oh, I can't change the batteries, so I don't use it anymore. I can't change the batteries, too much trouble. So that was that, and they said they didn't need to put it. I brought it up at council and they started putting them in, but the property was in a terrible state, and they were arguing about doing repairs that would have improved the property. They're damp running down, all sorts of problems. They would not, and they bring in this case of this girl who died from mould. That was in a council flat, not in a private landlord's flat. If it was in a private landlord's flat, that private landlord would be in jail. Have any council officials gone to jail over this? No. But a private landlord will be hung up, hung, dried and quartered in front of the whole world's press. The evil landlord. But it was in a council property. So the government are going to struggle to meet these standards unless they just make them exempt and just pick on the small guys, the little landlords. What else is coming in? Ban on advance rent payments. So you'll not be able to collect any more advance rent than a month's rent. Why? What's wrong with that? In fact, this advance rent payment is only usually used where tenants can't pass referencing. They failed referencing because they don't fit the bill. Maybe they're a mature student and their dad is paying for it. I don't know. There's lots of reasons. So sometimes they are the ones that offer, well, we'll pay 6 months in advance. We'll pay a year in advance. Or if they're an overseas person coming in and you can't reference them, we'll give you a year's rent in advance. So that they're happy, they're getting into the property, and the landlord's happy. What the hell is wrong with that? I mean, The landlords are not being greedy and saying we want 6 months rent up in front. I would rather have the cash flow rather than taking the rent up front personally. So that's going to go. For some reason, let's ban that. It's greedy landlords. Ban on discrimination, whatever that means. I won't even go into that. A right to request an adaptation of properties in the case of disabilities. So does this mean if you've got a disabled person going into a property, they accept it, they could later on say, well, no, I need a wider door, I need this, I need that. No. So what are you going to do when you see someone coming who's disabled? You're going to think, there's going to be problems here. But if they become disabled later on for any reason, they can request adaptations. I'm not quite sure who's going to pay for it. Maybe they pay for it. I don't know who will pay for it. But a lot of landlords might not want their properties hacked and chopped about to suit one person that might go, and then what do you do with it after that? Look for another disabled tenant. Restriction on rent increases. So I think rents have gone up now in lieu of this coming in. Some landlords have been putting their rents up, but that's going to be a lot of landlords, of course, don't put rents up for years, because if they're happy with the tenant, as I've been, you just keep things as they are. Don't put the rents up. They move out. You have to get a new tenant, pay new agent fees. It's a false economy. So you think you leave things as they are, but now it's going to be difficult. If you've left your rents for 5 or 6 years, you're going to find it difficult to catch up with the market rent. More powers for local councils, like they need more powers. They can already levy fines of £20,000 for this, that and the other. What do they need more powers for? What are you going to build an army there? The local authorities would love it. Local councils love power. They love building little teams of people. I can build a department here. I can have a little empire here and go around shutting down this and I've got my very own business prevention unit right here in the council. I might be a bit unfair to council. There are rogue landlords who have very poor properties, but they're going to have more powers. A new digital database for landlords. No, not for tenants, not for rogue tenants, just for landlords. You've got to go on this new digital database so people can see you, but you can't see them. Right? So you can't see that tenant who might have been to 6 other properties, caused a load of problems, not paid their rent and left. No, it's the other way around. So this, as I said, this was mentioned by the Prime Minister today in Parliament. You can look it up on Parliament. And at the end of no fault, they're cheering it. They're cheering him along. End of no fault evictions. He said the Conservatives failed to bring this in. Well, they only failed because they ran out of time in the last Parliament. They would have brought it in. So landlords may also be obliged to give due consideration to taking pets. Right now, this is something I wouldn't like in my property. I don't want. I've had smelly cats in the property. They left one place I had in a stinking place. You could almost retch when you went in there. I don't want pets in the property. Unfortunately, you get smells from even clean pets. You still get smells, and you can't really call that damage as such. How do you prove it? It's very difficult. But over the past year, this is on a survey by the website Spare Room, which is advertises people who want to use spareroom.co.uk to advertise a room in their house. They can let their room out. They get £7,500 tax free for letting their room. And they said on this site, they've done a survey, only 6% of people, 6.6% of rooms offered ads explicitly welcoming pets, but 93.4% did not. 93% of landlords did not want pets in their landlords, so they would say no pets. Can't do that anymore. Under this new bill, you will not be able to do that. 1/3 of people in the UK have pets, and 29% own a cat. That's probably the most popular type of pet. But the owner goes out to work and leaves the cat running around the property, scratching things, dropping hairs everywhere, and all making their mess in the kitchen. All that sort. I just don't want it. But it's going to be difficult. So it said if a tenant wants to keep a pet at home, landlords will not be able to unreasonably withhold their consent. What does unreasonably mean? Is it going to be decided by some stupid judge in a county court? One judge will say this, another judge will say that. I've seen these county courts. They're Mickey Mouse organisations. Half the judges, I think, just get out the wrong side of bed in the morning. One judge will like you, another one won't. One will always. It's just a ridiculous system, and it could take so long to get through. So that's a very vague kind of part of the law. And if a tenant feels you've made an unfair decision, they can challenge it by taking their complaint to the Private Rented Sector Ombudsman. Another quango, another organisation of highly paid people sitting on their backsides passing judgment or even to court. We've also got this is another reason why I'm quitting. We've also got falling returns. The soaring house prices have made it very difficult to get a positive yield. A yield means your return on your investment. So if you're buying a house for £100,000 and your rent was say £5,000 a year, or 400 something a month, £5,000 a year, that's a 5% yield. If you've got £10,000 a year, it's a 10% yield. Now, yields when I first started buying properties were 10-12%, but the interest rates were also high. Now in London, if you buy a property, you're lucky to get 2 or 3% yield, and that's not enough even to cover your 4% buy-to-let mortgage. Even if you're only borrowing 75%, you barely wipe its feet, and the lender wouldn't lend you. They say, well, no, your rent is not high enough to cover the mortgage and a bit more, if you know what I mean. So it's very difficult now, and this is why a lot of landlords have been buying further north. They've been buying in the Midlands, the Northwest, the Northeast, where it's cheaper even still. But a lot of landlords don't want to drive 300 miles to go and view properties, to buy properties, to manage them, to deal with problems. Yeah, you can get it managed up there, but do they really want to go out there? And also the payoff for that is you're going to get less capital growth than you would if you bought in London and the Southeast. But yields have gone down because prices have continued to rise. Again, that's not the landlord's fault. That's just the market. That's the market. In most countries, prices of properties have risen. You go all around the world, and people are struggling. I've been to America. It's worse there. Australia, Canada, New Zealand, a lot of European countries. In Spain, they're turning against Airbnb landlords, English landlords particularly, because they say people can't buy properties anymore in Ibiza and Mallorca and the mainland, so let's get them out. Now Spanish are bringing in 100% tax on foreigners buying properties in Spain. So that's to deter people buying properties. So it's a problem everywhere. It's not just in the UK. And you can't just blame landlords because the government have not built enough properties. And each time these happens, landlords try to adapt, right? They say, well, let's get into something different. Let's go into holiday lets to get around the Section 24 tax, right? This is a tax on your on landlords that meant they couldn't claim their interest on their profits without the property being in a limited company. But if you put it into a holiday let situation, you could still get the tax relief. That's been abolished. Jeremy Hunt did it. Yeah, Hunt, H-U-N-T, not C-U-N, no, Hunt. Conservative Chancellor brought that, he abolished that. So every time they move into some area where they can try and adapt to these draconian laws, they change it again. And so Jeremy Hunt was the left-leaning Chancellor under the last government, multimillionaire himself, doesn't want landlords to make money. The Conservatives, one of the reasons I think they did, they were certainly not popular amongst landlords. They screwed landlords, and they were the very type of people who vote for Conservative. And I think most of those will be voting another party under a guy named Nigel. I don't want to get political on this, but they got fed up with him because they continue to make life difficult when these people are hard-working people, row their own boat, build their own pension pot, if you like, through property, and then they had the rug pulled them from under their feet by a Conservative Chancellor, Hunt, right, that's his name, get that name right, Hunt. He's out now anyway, and we got Rachel Reeves, God help us. So many landlords, many landlords I spoke to are quite happy to stay in buy-to-let, particularly the ones doing high-quality houses in multiple occupation, HMOs, because they're going to go after the professional market. They feel happy to stay in there, and they will adapt to the new laws. I'd say most of them are younger landlords. Certainly the older landlords are getting out. A lot of landlords are not even aware of this. They go, oh, what's that? What renters' rights bill? No, I don't know about that. It's unbelievable. Most people are not even aware this is coming in. But that's fine if there's still an income to be made in that sort of multiple let. That's probably the only way they can make money, because it's hard to buy a property as a single family unit let in the London and South East and make money from it, make a positive yield from it. But if you turn it into HMOs, you turn it into 6 bedrooms HMOs, high quality HMOs, the returns are still good. So there is still money to be made. Some landlords are going into leasing. They're leasing their properties to a local housing association for homeless people, or they're leasing it to companies like Serco for putting in refugees. Okay, now that was even mentioned by MPs. Oh, these greedy landlords making money from us by housing people. Again, it's like you're shooting the messenger. Do you remember the old kings and queens in the ancient times, where if a messenger ran 100 miles to deliver this message and the king didn't like it, they kill the messenger. Well, I say don't kill the messenger. The messenger is just the one implementing what somebody else put into place. So if the government haven't got enough places to put all these people they're letting come into the country on boats and just arrive as students and stay on forever, that's not the landlord's fault. So landlords and companies like Serco have adapted to this. They're, okay, we'll house them. We'll get a government contract to house 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 asylum seekers for the next few years until they get their asylum, and then they go off and do their own thing. So now they're attacking landlords now. Oh, evil landlords, encouraging illegal immigration. It's just a load of bollocks. I'm sorry, but that is one thing that I'm interested in is leasing, because then I can lease the property to a housing association, an organisation, and they take it over for 5 years. Yes, I get a lower rent, but I don't have agency fees and I don't have voids and that sort of thing. And hopefully they will give the property back to me in the good state that I've given it to them. There are some hoops to jump through. They won't take every property. They certainly will not take every property in any area, and it certainly wouldn't work in an area like if you're getting a good return in parts of London. You're getting 3,000 or 2,000 a month for a property. Why would you want to give it to a housing association for £1,400? It just wouldn't work. So in certain parts of the country, mostly out of London, north and that sort of thing, if you've got the right properties in the right order, it's got all the health and safety, the alarms, the fire systems, all that sort of stuff, you can make money by giving it to a social a landlord or housing association. Sometimes they're for homeless, for vulnerable adults, could be ex-prisoners, it could be asylum seekers, it could be whatever. And they will say, right, we'll take it on for 5 years and you've got worry-free rental. That's what I'm interested in. I'm no longer interested in buy-to-let, where I'm getting a phone call on a Friday evening. Oh, the boiler's been leaking water. It's been happening for a few days now. I don't know why, but now it's stopped working. Well, what did you think would happen if water was pissing out of the boiler on Tuesday? Why didn't you ring me Tuesday so I can get a plumber in to sort it out? Why wait till Friday night and then tell me? It's driving me mad. I just can't take it. When I see the phone, oh my God, what's gone wrong now? What is it? What do you want? What's going on? It's like that. So I've just had enough of it. I'm making a joke about it, but I've been dealing with this for years and years and years. I've been dealing with tenants who leave I had a Polish guy. He seemed like a nice guy, fit guy, and when he left. He said, "I've gone back to Poland. I'm sick now. I can't come back. I don't want the room anymore. Can't pay you," and didn't pay me. I had to serve notice on him. Never turned up for anything, and didn't come back. He cleared out his room anyway, so he knew what he was doing and planning. And there was this big jar, like a big heavy jar, quite a big thing, and it looked like it was for plants, where you have plants in water, and it was full of like mouldy looking water. And when the builders cleared it out to clear it, because I was having the place refurbished, they said it was full of urine. So he was in his room, wouldn't go out to the bathroom. He was urinating in this big pot for weeks and weeks and weeks, and living in the room while he was pissing in this pot. And so I'm just fed up dealing with this. That type of. I've had tenants leave places in disgusting states. I've just had enough of it. So I'm getting out of buy to let. But am I quitting property altogether? No. I think property is still a good long-term investment. You've still got the asset there, and buy to let property and will still survive. Whatever idiots are in power, it will still survive. Landlords and business people will survive. The country's not finished. UK is not finished. They will survive stupid governments. They will survive stupid taxes and come back despite the government, not because of the government. So I'm not quitting property altogether. And there are loads of strategies in properties. There's rent to rent. There's buy and refurbish. There's buy, repair, refurbish and refinance. There's so many strategies you can go into. But the important thing is you get education. And this is what I want to tell you about now. I used a company that gave me very good education. When I started in property, I didn't have that. There was nothing around like that. And the education just wasn't there. You just had to learn as you went along, or just get tips from various people here and there. But when I learned about things, I thought, wow, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could buy a property using other people's money. I didn't know you could do that with no money down. I didn't know you could get this finance here and then refinance later. And I saw a guy last week that he bought two properties in one site using other people's money, using bridging, He's fixing them up into 2 6-bedroom high quality HMOs. On the side was a garage. He's built another house there using other people's money, and at the back is a corner property at the back. He's converting the garage and space at the back into another house at the back. That property is going to be worth millions, and he's going to keep the 2 HMOs for his income, for it to support his family and that sort of thing. But very clever guy. He's done it nearly all without very much of his own money at all. So he's got investors, he pays them properly, and it's worked. So it can be done, but you need to learn these strategies. They're not easy. So if you're interested in going on a free sort of taster Zoom session, click on the link. Sure you get the proper education, or read books and that. Don't just go on a few YouTube channels here and there. Get the proper education. It's not going to cost you a lot of money. You can do basic courses for very cheaply, and then go into property. But buy-to-let for me is out of the window, but maybe not for you. But there are lots of strategies where you can make money from property and earn money in the future. Yes, we'll survive the Labour government, we will survive the next Conservative or any other government, because the need is there. People need somewhere to live. They're living longer. The population is growing and will continue to grow, and the country will bounce back from whatever government has done to it. So I hope I've ended on a positive note, and for me, I'm looking forward to a good future out of buy-to-let, but not out of property. Thanks very much, and bye for now. Sorry it's been a long session tonight, but I hope that's been useful. Do comment, do like and subscribe. Put in the comments whether you agree with me or not. I know I'll get a few tenants attacking me, calling me greedy, parasites, and all that sort of stuff. But that's fine. I read all the comments. I'll respond to all the comments, and whether you agree with them or not, do comment. Thanks very much for listening. And if you want property education, click on the link. You'll find it somewhere in the description. Thanks very much. Bye for now.